And we are live again. We're back in my bedroom. Unfortunately, Noel hasn't come back to save me from myself, so I have to bring you in again to my bedroom. I'm joined by a great guest today, somebody who we've had on the show in studio before. Tom isn't here, but Jason is here from MMA on Point. Jason, short notice. It's a short notice fight for you. Did you cut enough? Did you get the weight cut done? Did you beat your Romero's?
Oh man, I struggled. It was tough. It was really tough. I think I came in a little bit more than Romero did, 0.4 overweight. So it was a little rough.
Not too bad. If you haven't checked out Jason's stuff and Tom's stuff on MMA on Point, what are you doing? Go check it out. Go subscribe to their channel. In my opinion, it's probably one of the best channels for MMA on YouTube, especially for really snappy videos. You can, if you're eating breakfast, sit down, watch an MMA on Point video. You can get it done. You don't have to wait around for 3 hours watching some guy like me talk. But also subscribe to our channel. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. We don't really know what we're going to talk about. Hopefully there's people on the live stream now who can give us some suggestions, because we're lost. I'm joking, we have some stuff. We're going to talk about UFC 225, which went down, of course, in the weekend. Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker went to a very, very close decision. We can talk about the score in there, talk about the fight itself. Holm had a great performance, showed some new techniques, showed a new side to our game. We can talk about that. And maybe we can touch a little bit on 226. Greg Hardy made his pro MMA debut in the Contender series. He has a bit of a checkered background, of course. An Irish guy like me, I only can read about it because I don't know a whole lot about him. Maybe Jason can tell me a bit more about him. So first, UFC 225. I'm gonna just off the bat, I'm gonna ask you the big question that everybody, or the big debate that everyone is having. Who'd you score it, Yoel or Whittaker?
Man, so everyone is saying that this fight is really close, and I think I'm one of the only people that just saw it as fairly black and white. I saw that Yoel Romero hurt him in rounds 3, 4, and 5, whereas I thought Whittaker had some good rounds in 1 and 2. But especially under the new rules, which I believe they were under in Chicago, yes, everything is supposed to be geared more towards damage than anything else. So Whittaker could have been winning the entire round aside from that, but the most significant thing to happen in that round was to be rocked in the 4th. So I guess to kind of backtrack a tad, most people have no problem giving away the 3rd round, definitely not the 5th round. And the question is that a 10-8 or not? And then for the 4th, so many people are just kind of back and forth on that. But especially under the new rules where damage is supposed to be scored more heavily than everything else, for me, it feels more like a black and white issue. It's as simple as who got hurt the most there. I mean, it's like the old Pride rules. Sure. That's how you would have scored it back then. And I think that's the way it should be scored, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a fight. So, you can score all the points you want, but who looks worse for the wear at the end of the round? Yoel, his eye got blinded up in, what was it, the 2nd? So that's not a factor in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. So for me, it was pretty clear. But what do you think?
I scored it to Yoel Romero pretty much for the reasons that you said. I think that he'd done the most damage. Although I am kind of happy, just from a keeping things in order kind of way, that Robert Whittaker was given the decision for obvious reasons. Yoel Romero missed weight, and then you'd have a win over the champion, and then will they do another rematch when the guy has missed weight twice for 2 championship fights, although one was an interim? It would be insane. It would mess up the whole division. So in that case, I am happy that Whittaker won. And I also don't think it was a robbery. I know you said it was clear, but for me, it's not one of those fights where I think it was so clear and it was so decisive that it was a robbery. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe robbery is too far. I just think it was a really bad call, because if you didn't, how do you not give him the 10-8 in the 5th round for one? And so if you did, it would have been a tie. So there's one mistake there, and then there would also be the mistake in the 4th round. But, we put out a poll on our Twitter account. We've seen other people put out polls, and most people actually think Robert won. But I think the thing that people aren't taking into account is it doesn't matter who you wanted to win. Sure. It doesn't matter who you liked. I was going for Whittaker. Like Yoel, ever since Stoolgate, I've kind of not been in his corner, so to speak. But none of that matters. It's all about, well, if we've got a sport and we've got rules, we need to follow them. And it's as simple as that for me. So when it does come to it, I am looking at a tad binary. I'm not going to say robbery. because I can see the argument that people think that the point should have been, accumulated enough to win the fourth. But at the end of the day, the judges know the rules. They know the new rule sets. They're supposed to follow that. So that's what makes it a really bad call. But we know they're also not educated like they should be, or at least that's the criticism, right? So when it comes to making a decision that's a poor decision, I don't think it's necessarily something of which where they intentionally said, well, we're just going to go ahead and give it to Whittaker. So that's my thought. It's a very bad call, not a robbery.
Yeah, I think I agree with you with the score, and I think the final round not being a 10-8, just when you compare it to the other rounds, I don't know how you can't weigh that round heavier than the other rounds. I think it's a bit silly. It was clearly more dominant than a lot of them, although a lot of people did think that the first round could have been a 10-8 for Whittaker just because Yoel Romero didn't do a whole lot of work.
I think that's really pushing it. Because what is it about? I mean, for me, a 10-8 round has to be super, super dominant. It just has to be ridiculously dominant to where, I mean, it's like a Frankie Edgar, Gray Maynard type kind of situation where you almost get finished and you just somehow survive. That's what I feel like was happening in the fifth round. And certainly you can't say of those first two rounds. It was a point affair, and he did, bust up the eye really well, which I do believe was in the second. But Romero was never being close to being finished in any of that. So
is Joe Rogan right?
A couple times.
Is Joe Rogan right that Yoel Romero is the freakiest of freaks in the world?
It's such a weird world that we live in now because, a couple of years ago, you probably would have said that about somebody like Brock or Alistair Overeem, but both of those guys have tested positive. Yeah. I honestly, if we're to look at it now, as we have it for clean athletes, he might pop in a year or he might never pop. It might turn out that he's totally clean and he has a totally clean slate. And then for those of you that might be thinking of that time he did pop, he was absolved of that. That's literally gone. So not a part of the discussion so much. But it is one of those things where, as it stands now, I think that has to be the case. I can't think of anybody that hasn't popped for something that's ever looked that shredded, looked that good, been that explosive, been that fast. He's just an absolute monster, just insane. So.
Yeah, and you have to give credit to Robert Whittaker now, who I think is a very, very good representative of MMA, of the UFC. I think he's almost like a Rich Franklin GSP of sorts. I get that vibe across there. But you have to give him credit for what he did. He got hurt. He hurt his hand in the round. You could see it was a clean break of his thumb, which looked absolutely nasty. The first fight, he hurt his knee and still fought through it. And now has wins over Derek Brunson, Jacare Romero twice. So very, very impressive record. And I think at his age, he's still a really young guy. I think we have a lot to see from Robert Whittaker. I think he'd be pretty dominant in that division. Yeah,
I think one of the questions too is, what is his injury situation look like moving forward? Because it's only going to get worse. What is he, like 25 now? Or I'm not exactly sure, but
I'll check it. I'll Google it.
Sure. But yeah, so like it's only going to get worse as time goes on. Injuries tend to stack. So I guess the question is how much can he keep that under control moving forward? Is it just really bad luck? Is it something with his training? Can he change that around to be a little bit less accident prone? Who knows? But at this point, he's a fantastic champion. I counted him out big time because, he lost to Stephen Thompson at welterweight pretty devastatingly. So when he was fighting Jacare, I thought he was going to lose. When he was fighting Yoel, I thought he was going to lose. And the second time, it was pretty much a toss-up. I always go for the person who won the first time. I think that's just a good rule of thumb. Sure. And, of course, he did end up getting the win, even though I thought he lost. But, he's somebody I counted out for a really long time. And so to see him now where he is, and the fact that the naysayers like me have been silenced like him, I'm really happy to see that. And just a really smart guy, really polite guy, everything you would want in a representative of a champion, especially in a new place like New Zealand or Australia where he's from. So,
speaking of representatives of MMA, this is a good segue, but I also want to go back because I want to check out one of the things.
I know where
Colby
you're going.
Covington, probably not the best representative of MMA you could ask for, but he did have a pretty good performance on the night against Rafael dos Anjos, who I thought Rafael dos Anjos could have won this fight. I thought it was not a favourable fight, but going into it, I thought it was his fight to lose. But I think Colby Covington done a lot of good things in there. We've kind of found now that Rafael dos Anjos does have a lot of trouble going backwards. He has a lot of trouble when guys pressure him up against the cage. He can't really fight off his back foot. But I suppose, what do you think of Colby Covington's win? And was it a win? Because that one as well was a decision that people have disputed.
For me, I thought he did enough to win that round, or not round, but the fight as a whole. I just thought his game plan, I mean, it wasn't, there were some exciting moments, but in general, it was kind of exactly what I expected as far as a Colby Covington fight to go. But yeah, I mean, in terms of him being a representative, I think one of the narratives to kind of come out of this is that his game is working. Like, he might come off as the most ridiculous, most, I don't know, just kind of stupid, like transparently stupid, like talk to where you're just like, okay, this is totally fake, but it is working. And when you go back and you look at the metrics the day after on YouTube and who had the most views, obviously number one was Robert Whittaker, his post-fight. But dude, Holm's like backstage interview got 14,000 views. His had almost 300,000 views the day after.
Wow.
So when you compare the two, and of course it was him calling out Tyron Woodley and all this stuff, the thing that objectively I think is going on is his game plan is working, whether it's fake or not. And the funny thing is, the only reason why it's working is because people are talking about it so much. People are complaining about it so much. We're talking about it now. But I think at the end of the day, if people were just kind of like, yeah, it's fake, I don't care, then he would just totally die down. But now Tyron Woodley's been on the MMA Hour. He's talked back saying he wants to beat him so bad that the ref comes up to him, tries to stop the fight, and he says, no, I'll let you know when I'm done, you know, that kind of thing. So I think the trash talking has worked out. I don't like him. I don't believe his shtick. I don't even think he's a Trump supporter. I don't buy any of it. I just think he's totally full of it. Yeah, I think it's working. But yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, up to this fight, not that I didn't think it was working, but for me personally, it wasn't working. It still isn't really working for me, but that doesn't really matter. It matters, is it working for the people who, the casuals, I suppose. And it seems to be. Like, it does seem to be. And even his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan was a little bit better. It wasn't as cringy as the last few have been. It's not as forced. It seems like he's kind of he's developing into the character that he's trying to create a little bit better. And also all the discussion about him not having all these Twitter followers, and that's a reason why he's not popular. That's just because he spoils movies. Who wants to follow a guy who spoils movies? That makes no sense.
Well, what's funny is, as people were saying that, his Twitter followership went up like, I don't know, like 20% in that amount of time. So I think he was somewhere around 25,000. I think he's closer to 40 now.
Yeah.
So it was like each time they would talk about it. So he's at 41.8K is what he's at now. And I want to say when they first started talking about it, it was 25. They would say that he would jump to 30. Then they would say it again, he would jump to 35. You know, like every time you talk about him, you give him all the fuel he ever needs. And I personally don't follow him for that spoiler reason. Yeah. I personally don't. So, but yeah.
What do you think his limit is? Is Tyron Woodley a little bit too much for him right now, or would you favour him in that fight? Because it seems like a fight that that makes perfect sense. You know, two guys who clearly don't like each other. The fight pretty much sells itself. Colby will do his shtick. Woodley, I think, needs a foil. I think he's hasn't really had that. I think Stephen Thompson was an excellent matchup, although the fights didn't turn out as good as people would have hoped. But excellent matchup, as in a really high level fight. But Colby Covington's something different. He's a character. He's a guy who can maybe make Woodley the face, if you're on a call of pro wrestling.
Yeah, well, that's funny because I think of it more like heel versus heel. You know, if you go back to the days, I remember because I did used to watch wrestling as a kid, and I remember every once in a while you would see a bad guy matched up versus a bad guy, and you're like, what's going on here? This is so weird. And then it became like a normal thing for them to be the heel good guy kind of thing, of like Stone Cold and The Rock. I'm getting way into that. I don't like wrestling now, by the way. I should say that. But it's one of those things where I see it as Tyron is better on the ground. He is way stronger as far as explosivity and can actually knock you out like he did against somebody like Robbie Lawler, who's taken God knows how many punches from guys like Rory McDonald, Carlos Condit. Pretty much everybody has tried to throw everything at him, and he always stood through it while he was on that second run at welterweight. So in my opinion, I think Woodley beats him everywhere. I don't see it being nearly as competitive. I see it as something that Colby can always, it's MMA. That's how it works. MMA math doesn't work the way it ever should, one of those kind of things. But I do see it as Woodley is stronger, better wrestler, better grappler, has every area that Colby's in. I think he's better at it, personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a very difficult fight for Colby, although he has proved me wrong as well. I thought that the RDA fight was a pretty difficult fight for him, but obviously not. I think I'm not sure how Colby's game can work on a Woodley. I think it's that pressurized game. Who he has, developing striking. It's not the best striking in the world, Colby, but can he really worry Woodley with that striking enough to back him up against the cage and get some takedowns? I'm not sure. The chat is pretty funny right now. Tom Ransom, so Tom from MMA on Point, says that Jason loves wrestling every Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, so Tom and I sometimes get on these rants about pro wrestling, so that's a pretty funny one because every once in a while we'll really get into it. And he very much knows that I'm not a fan of wrestling. He's not a fan of wrestling either. We both work for What Culture, where wrestling was a big part of their culture, if you want to say
nice.
that. But I was not trying to go for that. I was like searching for another word. I was like, screw it, just go with it. But so we've had a bit of a history with it, but it's more of a begrudging history. I don't think I've cared about pro wrestling since like 2002, which is a long time ago. So
that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Some comments in the chat. With Romero supposedly moving up to light heavyweight for Gustafsson, who else in any division should move up? I got Wonderboy at middleweight doing work. So pretty open question. I suppose on the spot, who do you think could do well moving up a division?
Jesus. Wonderboy, I think he seems kind of light for that division. If we're to play it the way we are now,
he's lanky, but he seems light.
Yeah, lanky and lean. Yeah. So for me, if weight cutting stays the way it does, and people don't fight at the weights that they should fight, then absolutely I think he should stay at welterweight. Of course, there's going to be a time where, who knows? I mean, if Woodley keeps holding on to the title, I think he's totally stuck. Of course, they've been talking about Rockhold moving up, which I think makes a ton of sense. He was already massive anyway, so I think that makes sense. For whatever reason, a lot of names just aren't coming to mind. I'm trying to think of Mackenzie Dern. I mean, she clearly doesn't belong at 115. She's only made it like 3 times clean out of the 6 or 7 fights that she's had there. She's just had an awful track record. Does not belong there. We'll see this time where she's at the Performance Institute like she said she was going to be, and the UFC is going to kind of be like, hey, this is how weight cutting works. Maybe she'll be a little bit better off after that. But that's, I guess, off the top of my head, kind of being on the spot, she's one of those people that really comes to mind. Who else was it? Oh God, missed weight. He's probably going to be fighting for the title next, though. Who am I thinking of? 155. He's the guy that hit Chiesa last year. Kevin Lee.
Oh, Kevin Lee.
Yeah. So he ended up. What's that?
He spoke about going to 170 quite a bit. Kevin Lee.
It would make sense, but he's also so close to the title where it's like do you really want to leave now? While your stock is the absolute highest, to go with a GSP, the stock market, if you want to go with that example, I mean, his stock is as high as it could possibly be in that division right now. So I think he's either one way away from the title, or one win. Jesus, I can't talk right now, but he's either that far away from the title or he waits it out, so it's literally a matter of one fight for him. Poirier with Alvarez, I think, should get the shot next, though. But
yeah, the crazy thing about MMA in its current state, I think that there's so many to pick from that could go up in weight and it'd be good for them. It's just, the nature of weight cutting right now, they're not going to do it, or maybe the size difference will be huge, but naturally, so many guys should be fighting up a weight class. If it was forced, if they done the ONE FC model and you were forced to go up in weight and you were forced to do those hydration tests, I think we'd have a lot better fights. They're just not going to do that for some reason. But they can do this extensive drug testing, but they can't do this extensive weight cutting management thing. I'm not saying either is right, but I'm just saying, it is possible. It's not some crazy outlandish thing.
Yeah, what I think sucks, this is the thing that, so I get that people are all about states' rights here, and there's that versus the federal kind of thing. But when it comes to an athletic commission, having to go to every single state athletic commission, doing it 50 times is just stupid. It's ridiculous. The concept that we can't just federally pass a law that says, oh, you can use replays in a fight now. It's so stupid that every single athletic commission has to prove every little thing. It's so inefficient. It's so dumb. I would love to see it just either be taken away from those commissions at all and went federal. It went to the ABC, the Boxing Commission, which is the ABC runs MMA and boxing, by the way. Yeah. But I really wish that they would just centralize it in some way to where it's not this stupid, ridiculous, archaic system. And then you've also got these judges. I mean, it delves into a bunch of different things, but I think that's the thing holding it back. USADA, they're more than happy to say, oh, well, you got another drug testing program, which means we don't necessarily have to test as often or even at all in some cases. I think it really helps them because those commissions are usually totally broke. So I think it really helps them, unless they're Nevada, of course, but I think it totally helps them to have USADA come in. And I think it would help if they maybe figured out a way to do it outside on their own. But yeah, I mean, if there's one problem that's glaring more than anything else right now, it's weight cutting. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, and that's the big debate. We can talk about that a little bit later. But I completely agree with the whole state thing. Living in Ireland, it's such a small country, a little tiny island, that the whole idea of having states and states having their own rights is very strange to us. It's very strange. It's why don't the whole country just do that? What's the problem? So I completely agree. Yeah. It's weird. It's a weird one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to sound like Joe Rogan here. I've never smoked weed in my life, but the idea that all these states are still debating it, and then there's a federal law against it at the same time, so some people are still getting arrested for it. It's just really stupid. So I get it on oh, well, you want a local government controlling your state, which has a different climate. I mean, because that's how big we are. You've literally got the desert in Phoenix, and you got here, which is, gets as cold as it does over there, but also gets as hot as it does in Alabama, so I get that there are things that need to be local, but when it comes to really negligible things like how a sport does business, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be all right, let's get the government in there and make it to where that it should be the same everywhere. I mean, it's the same octagon. It's the same regulations for the size of the cage. There's a certain diameter you work in between. It should be the same for regulations. It should be the same across the board. It's just really dumb. It's so stupid. So
you done a video on that before, wasn't it? Or it was why the UFC could ditch commissions pretty much. It was a kind of a video based on that, wasn't it? Yeah.
So obviously I've got rants for days on it, but sure. I did.
Yeah, it's very, if you haven't checked that one out, people, go check it out. It's a obviously I don't agree with everything, but I think it's a very interesting and logical I suppose debate that or statement that you said.
Sure.
In the chat, there's a couple more things. Does Khabib move up eventually? 1-2 title defenses and move up. Khabib move eventually? I think possibly. He's a huge guy. I think one of the things about Khabib, about him staying at lightweight, was to win that title. I think he put so much work in at lightweight, he wasn't just going to move away without winning the title, or at least contending for it. So now that he has it, maybe a couple of title defenses and he moves up. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the obvious one too. I can't believe I didn't think about that. But yeah, I think he does 1 or 2, title defenses, 3 tops before he decides to make the move. And he's talking about GSP and how he's idolized him. So when they asked him after 223 if there was a possibility of him fighting GSP, I think that's his dream fight. I think if he can fight anybody, that's the one. Even though he was saying, he's already done everything, he can retire. But I think if he were, to be lying awake at night thinking about a fight in his younger days, like when he was getting started in MMA, I think that's what he was thinking about.
Yeah.
So I think that makes the 170, obviously, that's one I can't believe I didn't think of. But yeah, 170 for him, I think he'd be roughly in the same position if he was there, if not fighting for the title, really close to it if he decided to go up.
Aiden Mack, Rob's polished off that bottle of whiskey from last week. I sure did. I actually didn't. I drank some of it. It's in the kitchen. Can Ortega move up? Ortega, big guy, really young. Wanted to go up to 55 to get that late notice shot against Khabib, and didn't happen.
Oh my God, that would have been awesome.
That would have been amazing. I think maybe next year at some point we'll probably see Ortega up there.
Yeah, and he's kind of like Kevin Lee, even further along. He's already got the title shot, where it's clearly going to make a ton of sense for him at some point to move up, but he's right there. So I think I don't think he's had as many issues. One, he's never actually missed weight, and 2, he's never really voiced issues with a weight cut. So I think he would probably stick around there for a while. I mean, he might stay around for 5 fights if he were to win the title and defend it, saying he could defend it that long. I think if he were to map it out, I think it would be somewhere around there, Yeah.
Other fights on 225 before we move on. There's some interesting ones. Holly Holm got a big win against Megan Anderson. I thought going into this one, I thought she was getting a lot of hype about her striking, and I just thought that she was still very inexperienced to fight somebody like Holly Holm, and that's what happened. That's not me tooting my own horn. That's just I get a lot wrong as well. But yeah, Megan Anderson, she came out and she looked good in the first 30 seconds. She looked a little bit scary. I think she hurt Holly Holm pretty badly, and then Holly Holm changed her game plan up. I thought it was a really good performance by Holm.
Yeah, and it was surprising just how big Megan Anderson was standing next to her.
Yeah.
Just kind of seeing, because she's all of 6 feet tall, which is how tall I am. And it's just like, oh, wow, that's a big girl. And I think it was just kind of shocking to see how big of a difference there was skill-wise. I didn't expect to see that. I thought it would be much closer, especially since she was the one to be in talks for a Cyborg fight leading up to the booking of this match. Sure. I think a lot of people thought she should have been fighting Cyborg already. And to just see how big of a separation there was, I think there was just such a big surprise there. And I think what it also did, because Holly Holm in the interviews up to the fight talked so much about how she was working on her deficiencies for the first time in a few years, really since she's just started entering into MMA. So you saw, I thought, a lot of different things, namely the ground game from her that you just never see. And being able to take down such a big girl like Megan Anderson, I think it really showed that Holly Holm isn't, for me, I was like, okay, she's lost how many title shots now? She lost to all these contenders, and now she's, fighting another contender. And I felt like it was just kind of one of those things. Well, everyone loves Holly. She's great. She's excellent. She's a big name. She's the biggest name probably in women's MMA right now that's not a champion, or a former champion. She is a former champion. I guess Joanna might be the only bigger name aside from her that's not a champion right now. So at first that was kind of my thought, but then to see this kind of go down, you realize, okay, there really is that much of a separation at the top at 135. So it would be interesting. You think Amanda Nunes with her power and everything she has versus somebody like Holly Holm, who is way more credentialed on the feet and has those fundamentals that'll punish you every time. you've got to think that fight is going to make a little bit more sense. I would like to see her get 1 or 2 more fights before that happens, though. I just feel like it's too soon. But
just because that she had a couple of losses before this.
I mean, really, since she won the title, who's she beaten?
Yeah.
Betchko Hea. Yeah. It's just like, it's not the most impressive resume to have since losing to Miesha Tate.
No, it's not. So. But the unfortunate thing is that it's so shallow that that's the best fight you can make at bantamweight.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks.
I mean, normally you don't put somebody on the loss against somebody that's on the rise for a title, but maybe Raquel Pennington or somebody like that, somebody that was just fighting for the title recently, or somebody that at least has had their name towards the top would make a lot of sense. Maybe her versus, I don't know, Kat Zingano's so inactive now, and Kat Zingano's been on a losing streak.
Yeah.
It's just that's the last person to beat Nunes, so that would make a statement of sorts. It's just really hard to kind of place her in the division now as somebody that beat who most people thought should have been fighting for the title instead of fighting Holm. So it really mixes things up in a way. I think the UFC will probably just go ahead and book her versus Nunes, just because that's the biggest fight they can make right now.
And that's what the UFC are about right now. Just make the biggest fight that can possibly make some money, and we'll take it. Tai Tuivasa.
Ketlin Vieira.
Huh?
Sorry, Ketlin Vieira. Ketlin Vieira, probably.
That's good. That's a good fight.
That would make way more sense to have go for a title next, or fight Holly Holm next. But sorry, I just happened to pull up the page right as you were switching to Tai Tuivasa. So
I was gonna switch to Tai Tuivasa, but I think one more point about Megan Anderson. I think it's good that she lost this one. I think if she went in there and
oh my God,
the first 30 seconds played out like it did, but Holm was finished. Man, I think, like, looking now in hindsight, how early is it for her to fight Cyborg? That would be a scary, scary proposition.
Yeah, that would have been really interesting if she would have finished the fight, and then everybody seeing her as this monster.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you realize after that 30 seconds, no one would have gotten to see what it would have looked like. That would have been super crazy. But that's also MMA for you. You know, you just never know. Unless it just happens to play out that way, how it could go.
Exactly. Tai Tuivasa, big win. Another close decision, I suppose, against Andre Arlovski. I know a lot of people scored it to Arlovski, a person I was sitting with, watching the fights, an old host of the show, Carl. I think he scored this one to Arlovski. But what do you think of the decision? I thought Tai Tuivasa won. I thought it was pretty impressive, and I liked that he went to decision. We got to see that. He clearly slowed down, but no, I think it was a good performance.
Well, this is the point where it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. So
I've done it.
All the time. One of my other passions is music. And so I uploaded that Romero video probably about noon my time. Well, I guess it was closer to 1 is what it was. And then I got a call as I was doing that to go play a bar gig. So to go play some music.
Nice.
And so I did that, and I got home around 11. So I actually missed everything but the main event and had to retroactively kind of go back. And when I heard that it was a decision with Tai Tuivasa and Arlovski, I didn't watch it. I straight up didn't watch it. So the truth of the matter is I can't speak intelligently on it. It does seem like it was close. I'm kind of happy to see the younger guy win.
Yeah.
If I'm going to talk about it from a very superficial level, but I honestly can't give a real assessment of what happens, except for the shoey.
The shoey, yeah. A lot of people are obsessed with this shoey thing.
Yeah. He's like spitting in it and drinking it, but I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it. But the best part was that he turned to Joe Rogan and was like, "Oh, can I have your shoe?" And Joe Rogan was like, "No, you can't. Go get somebody else's shoe."
Jesus,
that was funny.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. But
what
I think Tuivasa, he seems to have that little spark of star power around him. I feel there's something about him. There's something that people are latching on. It could just be the shoey. You never know, but there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, like I've talked about this a lot before. I think what makes somebody a star I mean, you just have to have personality, like I did a Demetrius Johnson video where I talked about why he isn't popular. And I think a large part of it is unless you're just incredibly dominant, you're just finishing people incredibly fast, or you just have tremendous name value that you're fighting like Anderson Silva had against Chael Sonnen, Vitor Belfort, Yushin Okami getting that win back, like just having this laundry list, Dan Henderson, all these people that you beat. A lot of times you don't necessarily have anything going for you unless you just have a verbose personality. And that's one thing Tai Tuivasa has going for him. He's just kind of this crazy guy that will get out there and just show the people who he is. And so it's like you're kind of either letting people into your personality, because I don't fight, I don't do jiu-jitsu, I don't train at all. I'm just some asshole that loves fighting and talks about it for a living. For me, that's the part I'm attracted to, is what makes somebody in today's day and age where I can literally have a career on YouTube say, I don't want to do that. I want to be hurt or hurt people for a living.
Yeah.
And so there's something about a Tai Tuivasa or some of those people that can really be honest. Rashad Evans isn't particularly known for this, but he's very, very open and honest. And it was something that made me always like Rashad Evans, despite him not doing well. But like, it's one of those kinds of things that if you can let people in your minds, let people know what's going on, they can latch onto that and they can kind of grab onto that. So that's a very kind of deeper answer to that. But I really think that that's the thing about Tai Tuivasa. He's allowing people in. He's letting people see who he is. And it kind of fits a little bit of the stereotype that he's just people that fight are a little bit crazier than the average Joe, a little bit more of an adrenaline junkie in the same way that Cerrone is, or the same way that some of these other guys are that like Chuck Liddell is known for partying the night before a fight. The second Chuck Liddell fight or Chuck Liddell Randy fight, he got drunk and he was just hammered. So when he went into the first fight, because he lost the first fight, not the second one. He lost to Randy Couture. So it's one of these things that Tai Tuivasa, it just has a personality. It kind of lets you know, like, okay, this is the type of person that is willing to go out and fight for a living and do all this crazy stuff and drink out of a shoe and just be super wildly expressive. It gives something for people to latch onto. And all of a sudden, instead of being, just a little picture on the UFC's website for each of those cards, you now have something to associate with that. I think it's something that fighters, I don't think they need to fake it. I don't think they need to bullshit it. I don't think they need to be Colby Covington. I think they just need to kind of expose themselves a little bit to the people in a nude way. I'm kidding. But that's what Tai Tuivasa is doing. So
yeah, and it's that kind of you kind of say it and then people are like, shut up, you're being silly. But it really is that thing of just be yourself. You have to show people yourself. And some people are just boring people in general, but that even if that comes across, you're still being real, you're still being true to who you are, and people will latch onto that as a person. Like GSP isn't the most entertaining personality in the world, although he can be hilarious when he gets talking about aliens and dinosaurs and stuff like that. But he's not the most entertaining, but he was just real, he was just himself, and people latched onto that. It's like, this is just a cool guy who goes up and beats people up.
Yeah, and he was just kind of a game changer in a lot of ways too. He's the first guy to start wearing suits to press conferences, the first guy to really care about his image publicly. So you did, even though he was kind of projecting, it's really funny with him because he's so careful not to curse on the mic and stuff like that because he knows kids are watching. But you'll watch his fights and you can audibly hear him just saying, "Oh, that was fucking crazy, man!" Like, I think it was right after he first won the title. Just from editing one of our videos recently, you see him after the fight when he first won the title against Matt Hughes. Was it against Matt Hughes? It was the interim title that he won. Yeah. So right afterwards, they were talking about how they were going to do a fight in Montreal, which was kind of unheard of at the time. And he was like, "Are you fucking serious, man?" Like you just hear this like other side of him that does exist, but in a way, he's still exposing his personality of getting out there and being professional, because you're realizing that's the kind of guy he is, that realizes and kind of takes hold of something like that. Yeah. But very, very impressive.
Speaking of stars and speaking of putting yourself out there and speaking of showing your personality, CM Punk versus Mike Jackson happened. And a lot of people were upset with the fight. A lot of people... going into it, we're upset with the fight for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Now that it's happened, and now that we saw what happened, and I don't think really we should have expected a whole lot better from CM Punk. To get angry now is a bit silly. But what was your thoughts on the fight as a whole and the CM Punk experiment, I suppose you could say?
Well, so this is one of the things I was kind of saying. I don't train, I don't do anything like that, but there were things that, man, it's almost like sometimes the most motivating thing in the world is to see someone do something badly. There's no better way to, like, for me, for whatever reason, to want to start learning jiu-jitsu than to see someone do it that poorly, or just grappling. Like, you see them up against the cage and you see Mike Jackson digging for underhooks, and CM Punk isn't even trying to fight for them. He's literally just got his arms draped around him. And it's like, dude, this is now 4 years. It's not 2 years. And it's been your job, or at least hopefully. So it makes me wonder, like, has he been training like it's been portrayed, like before his first fight when they did the whole docu-reality series of him? Is it really that way? Or is he just kind of training part-time and he's not really taking it seriously? It's just this really, really strange thing. And I get why people were mad because of those kind of bolo punches while he was, like, kind of taunting a little bit. I do think he intentionally knew what he was doing, even though, like, his post-fight interviews have said otherwise. I do think he very, very intentionally was milking the moment. I 100% do, and I can see why people are mad about that. But I also don't necessarily blame him. It's not something, obviously, I wouldn't fight, but if I were to fight, it's not something I would do. Yeah. I would want to finish him fast. What I think the whole situation is, the reason why Dana's super pissed and saying that he's not going to stick around is I think Dana kind of hoped he would have lost. And usually I don't support that kind of banter because I hate it when people just try to suppose what other people want. But he very clearly won that fight. He did nothing wrong. You can showboat, you can do all those things. I mean, Anderson Silva is famous for doing it. Rashad Evans, as I mentioned earlier, is famous for doing it. Connor, Nick, Nate. The list just goes on and on and on of people that showboat in the ring and never once have been, unless it was, well, I mean, I guess, and now that I'm saying this, though, there was the Anderson Silva Maya fight where he could have finished the fight at any point in time, and Dana White's never been as pissed. So maybe as I'm kind of just, like, getting my thoughts out there and I'm kind of realizing maybe there, I guess, is a little bit to that idea of, it makes sense that Dana White would want to, fire somebody for showboating over somebody they're clearly dominating. So maybe there is a little bit to it, but it does very much feel like he was banking on this to be the way to get rid of Mike Jackson, because Mike Jackson won't beat anyone else. I think Mike Jackson probably will still have another fight. I think he'll just lose, and then that'll be the nail in the coffin, the reason to actually fire him, even though Dana White said he basically is firing him already. Yeah. So
I don't see Mike Jackson coming back. I don't think really there's a clamoring of people to say, oh no, we want to see Mike Jackson. So I don't think there's going to be enough there for Dana to change his mind. I think Dana has probably made his mind up. But the fight itself, it was a terrible fight, and it was two guys who clearly are not at UFC level. I know we need to, they're at UFC level as in they are fighting in the UFC, so we do need to treat it that way somewhat. But then you also have to say to yourself, this was an experiment. I don't know. It's a weird one. I've no problem with CM Punk fighting at all. If he wants to fight, go ahead. It's just unfortunate that, not unfortunate, but it's just from a fan's point of view, it's like, of course he was going to go to the UFC. If you look at the pay-per-view boys that he's been involved in, he sells a lot of pay-per-views, so of course he was going to be involved there, especially in this day and age. But if that was on a regional show, it's not under that huge spotlight. Because if you watch some other fighters or some other pro wrestlers who tried MMA, not the really good ones like Brock Lesnar, but like Dave Bautista, that was terrible. That was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. And I've seen worse fights in the UFC than what that CM Punk Mike Jackson one was. But because of who CM Punk is and how this fight came about, people are obviously shitting on it a little bit more. With that said, it was terrible. I'm not saying it wasn't.
To quote Conor McGregor, you got to have some attributes. Like you got to be someone that is like a Brock Lesnar or someone like a Dave Bautista even, where you can clearly see that strength is going to be in their favor. CM Punk has nothing going for him. And even Dave Bautista, and even Dave Bautista was fighting in a regional show. For CM Punk, though, like, and the Mike Jackson thing, I think Mike Jackson was the pawn that was set up to be knocked down, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
I mean, you just couldn't pick a possibly worse example than that.
Yeah.
And he won. So, I mean, the experiment is, I mean, if you thought it was decisive after the Mickey Gall fight, it is just so, like, case closed, sealed, and shut. There's just absolutely no way anybody that is a self-respecting promotion will book him for any other reason than money, which was, of course, the first reason for the UFC. But now it's even worse. You know, you've seen him fight against somebody that didn't belong in the cage. He didn't belong in the cage, and he got dominated in the biggest gimme fight he could ever have.
Yeah.
So
now let's watch him go to Bellator. In the comments, Nick0424 said talent evaluation and matchmaking has gone to pot after Joe Silva left, so it's gone to shit after Joe Silva left. I think there's something there. I do think I don't think it's just because of that, but I'm sure that's a factor as well. But the UFC do have good matchmakers. I don't think that's the problem. I think I don't know, their business strategy is probably more of the problem right now.
I don't agree with that assessment, because personally, the way I see it is Sean Shelby came from the WEC, was brought in to the UFC to book the lighter weight divisions, because naturally that was his wheelhouse. Hey, what's up, Tom? He's back. But so, it's like one of these things where, you know, I actually kind of lost my train of thought trying to talk to Tom. What were we talking about? We were talking about Joe Silva. Yeah. So when you're talking about somebody like Sean Shelby, and I forget the other guy's name, the Australian guy that's booking for him now too. I can't remember his name, but Mick Maynard. So he, like, both these guys are really, really well credentialed, really well experienced. And I believe Mick Maynard actually started before Joe Silva left. So, I mean, you couldn't possibly have any better tutelage. The fights that we're complaining about, the fights that we don't like to see booked, Joe Silva never had anything to do with in the first place.
No.
He might have had input. He might have had some say in it. Sean Shelby might have some input. So might Mick Maynard. But when it comes down to it, what you're looking at is Dana White saying, okay, I want Conor McGregor to fight Khabib next. That's what you're hearing. That for all these main event matches, almost all of them, at best, it's a scenario which it's presented, and then Dana White's like, nope, I don't like that fight. Or, you know, anybody else that's higher up that he might trust as a confidant. He might even still call Lorenzo from time to time. I doubt the WME guys, I doubt either of them are involved at all. I think they're pretty hands off from what I can tell. I mean, how many promotions or how many times have they actually even spoken to fighters themselves? They appear to be very hands off. So my kind of interpretation of that is, if you hate the matchmaking as of late, which a lot of us do, it's Dana White 100%. It's for the main event, for especially numbered pay-per-view cards, there's no way that's getting past his desk without him saying nope or yes. You know, that's all Dana.
Yeah.
So.
Tom, I'm back, guys, juggling this on Love Island. This Love Island thing is it's big over here. It's a TV show. I don't watch it. I think it's like Survivor, but based on like Jersey Shore and Survivor mixed together into a terrible concoction. Yeah, it sounds awful. But in my workplace, everyone's talking about it. I don't know what the deal is with it. Yeah, it's weird.
That sounds like Naked and Afraid. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Like, it's not a dating show, but they literally, like, I don't know how they legally get this thing off the ground, but they literally set people off on an island, butt naked, and they say survive for 2 weeks, or whatever it is. It might even be longer. I think it's actually 30 days. And of course, if they need to, tap out, so to speak, they're allowed to. But it's insane, and it's not a dating show, but it sounds like that.
JL, Love Island related. Which fighters would make a great couple? I got McGregor and Faber. I don't disagree with that one.
Conor and Artem.
Oh yeah.
Favorite would be good though because they have good banter. They have that relationship level banter.
Yeah, it seems like they click on a personal level.
Fucked up Jersey Shore meets Fear Factor. That's great. That's what Tom said.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm kind of interested. If they do stunts, maybe I'm interested. No, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to go through any more 225 because I think there's some other stuff we can touch on, so we don't get too bogged down in it. But there was a lot of good fights, good performances. Is there anything else that really stood out to you on UFC 225? Any kind of storylines coming out from it that you really, really find interesting, or anything related to that?
Give CM Punk a chance. No. Yeah, Rashad Evans. That's a bit disappointing. It's just time to retire. It just is. Pettis getting the win over Benavidez is huge. It a bit more validates the Cejudo matchup now because Cejudo lost to Benavidez, and now Benavidez is on a loss. That makes that matchmaking a little bit better now. But yeah, those are just my quick thoughts. Everything else, that's for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I thought the Curtis Blades win was impressive, and
right.
Heavyweight needs some good talent, so not mad at that.
Yeah, that's good to see. Two new heavyweights, him and Tai Tuivasa stepping forward. Whether or not you agreed with the decision, at least propels the division forward enough to say, all right, here are a couple of guys that are up and coming that actually, Curtis Blades is maybe one fight at most or fighting next for the title kind of thing. So
yeah, and he looked good against Ngannou before. Obviously Ngannou doing what he done. The UFC or Dana White's Contender series, whatever way they want to say it, was debuted last night. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole show because it's insane. I don't know how I used to do this. I used to stay up and watch all the UFC events from Ireland, and it's silly, it's stupid, it's I don't know, it's silly. Last weekend I set up for UFC 225 with a friend drinking, and I didn't get to bed until 6:45. 6:45 a.m. It's silly. So I didn't watch it last night, but I did see some of the fights. I did see the Greg Hardy fight. What was your thoughts on Greg Hardy and him signing with the UFC? Now that he's only 1-0 and Dana White signs him to the UFC, I suppose it's not surprising because of his name, but maybe some people would find it surprising based on his past record, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I'm not a true American because I'm not an American football fan. I think maybe there's just the contrarian inside of me where I'm just like, I'm just tired of people talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
I think also, just being a UFC fan, that's probably the only sport I'm really a fan of. Like, I don't really give a shit about other sports. I used to play them growing up. I played basketball, baseball, football, and soccer, trigger word. So I used to do all those things growing up. But I never, ever, ever gave a shit about watching it. I just never cared. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it is about fighting. I guess, maybe it's an attention span thing where I'm like, oh, that guy hit him. I care about that.
I get that.
As opposed to a ball going through a hoop, I just don't really care. But when it comes to somebody like him, he is still fairly well known, Greg Hardy, of course, for having some domestic dispute issues, having some drug issues. And of course, the domestic dispute issue is obviously the biggest thing when you're convicted for literally attacking a woman. It doesn't get much worse than that. You know what I mean? Short of actually killing someone else or doing worse things, there's not much worse that you can do as a human being. So I think it's really, really tough. But my other perspective on that is, if you're out of jail, you've done your civic duty and things like that, you do still need to be able to make a living. I don't know how well off he is from his old days, but, there is a point where it does have to move on. You have to be able to say, well, I need to work, I need to eat, I need to make money. And good for him if he's really trying to turn his life around. He's just going to have to be impeccably clean moving forward. But when it moves to the fight itself, it doesn't get any more impressive than that. I don't think there's been a more impressive finish on, it's only been one season so far, but, you had guys like Sean O'Malley come through and steal the show and are now becoming stars in their own right. who had a fantastic knockout on the first season. So you've got somebody like Greg Hardy comes in, stops a guy in, what was it, 7 seconds. It was crazy, too, because what was his name again? I'm not super familiar with Lane. So Austin Lane.
He was a footballer, too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was also an 0-0 professional record as well. So there was a lot of parallels between the two. But when he went down the first time, the first hit, it was like you can kind of see the experience wasn't there, because rather than like what you would see from an old school Matt Hughes or one of these other guys that you just see their bell kind of get rung, you see them naturally either go into they'll try to go for the ground game, or they'll go into defensive, they'll try to clinch.
They have options.
They'll try to take one of those routes to getting themselves kind of back in the game. Yeah. What Austin did is he went down. It looked like he also hit his chin on his knee, and then he came back up, and he was kind of more like focused on the pain, like, oh shit, what just happened? It's kind of what happened with him. So you could kind of see the inexperience, at least from what it seems like from the outside, and then you just see him just get viciously, brutally KO'd right after that. Oh, his was 57 seconds. It was the Menefield knockout that was 7 seconds. I was getting the two mixed up. But still, it just absolutely impressive. And I think from a UFC's perspective, I mean, it's just really hard to ignore that. This was one of the harder roads, short of the Ultimate Fighter, of being able to actually come in and saying, all right, well, we'll give you a chance, but you've got to fight your way in. And if you do, you're pretty much never going to be in. I mean, it's going to be like somebody like Menefield, who actually did come back. It's really going to be a while. You're going to have to wait and kind of fight your way through. But Greg Hardy probably got the most impressive finish that we've ever had on it's not that long, but the most impressive finish there. So I think it makes sense that he's being brought in. I think it makes sense that they're putting him on a provisional contract, a little bit more of a developmental type kind of thing, because clearly he's got it just kind of naturally. World-class athlete is something that you rarely find in MMA.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's really kind of juggling who he is as a person and his past versus, can you really pass up the opportunity to sign a heavyweight who is one of the most athletic guys that you could probably get? So it's a weird one. I think the big kind of debate is with Dana White. It's with Dana White, and it's his statements in the past. Dana White in 2014 said there was this is a quote that Jeff Wagenheim put up. There's one thing that you'll never bounce back from, and that's putting your hands on a woman. Dana White right about now. I didn't mean that. Greg Hardy, welcome to the UFC. So it's it is, when you look back at that. Now, Dana White has said a lot of things that he's kind of turned his back on in the past. But when your president says that, and then you do sign a guy who has a past like that, it's not going to come off well to the mainstream media.
I think the context is, you were fighting for me and you made bad press about my organization, you're fired. Yeah. Now that you did this beforehand, maybe we'll give you a shot.
Pretty much. Yeah. James Kane in the chat said, give him a chance. I say give him a chance. So there's people out there that wants to see him. Yeah, I do like that they put him on some kind of developmental contract. That sounds interesting to me, and it's not something that the UFC do a whole lot. I know they kind of done it with Mackenzie Dern, who was with LFA, wasn't it? LFA, and she fought with LFA, and then I think they were paying her or something, and they done it with Cyborg as well. They were paying some of Cyborg's contract in Invicta. I think it's a good idea. If you sign somebody who is inexperienced but you still want them in your promotion, put them out there to some regional promotion who's not competing with you. It's not like you're going to give Greg Hardy to some promotion and then they're going to rise up against the UFC. It's just not going to happen. So it does make sense.
Bellator's all over it.
Yeah.
They'll be there.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Well, I mean, it reminds me of our last conversation when Tom and I were on the podcast with you and Noel. The idea of just, it seems like a fairly simple idea, and I don't know what barriers exist. I don't know what couldn't be there, but the idea of just having some sort of facility meant to build up and create people. And you can even make a reality show out of that if you wanted to, or you could even make a weekly show out of that where you have these guys having these amateur fights and you're kind of seeing who makes it through the season or whatever that might be. I don't know, but it does seem like one of those kind of things where, you find those really strong NCAA caliber wrestlers that have a chance to go on to an NCAA program, or they could go to the UFC, or even after that, they could literally have a scholarship program where they say, well, you come here and you train here and we'll take care of you and make sure you make your way to the UFC and we'll give you a shot. I don't know I don't know what barriers exist there, but it does seem like a very, very simple way to groom future stars and catch them before anyone else does. I don't know what exists there. I don't know what barriers do, but it does make a lot of sense.
Makes sense. What's your thoughts on the Contender series as a whole? Are you a fan?
I love it. I think it's so much better than The Ultimate Fighter, because The Ultimate Fighter, I think it was great back in the day. I mean, that first season, The Ultimate Fighter was just a great show from beginning to end. You had the guys like Josh Koscheck in there. You had Bobby Southworth, the two of them, putting the hose. Who is it I'm thinking of? Chris Lieben, while he's trying to sleep. And you just see all this crazy drama kind of go down. And it was maybe just something kind of novel, kind of stupid back in the day that really worked out. And, of course, you had the fight with Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner. That was just really the kind of thing that saved them. And I think it made a lot of sense at a time. But I think as time's kind of gone on, people, I think they've kind of caught the bad taste of reality television. I hate reality television.
Me too.
Mostly bullshit.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see this possibly be the next place it goes. Cut out the bullshit, just have a fight.
Yeah.
And I love
Completely
that.
agree.
Love that.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
It's an awesome show. But although Love Island apparently is the new reality show that everyone's loving, so we're not completely out of the woods with this reality TV. Another thing that was in the news was, it's possibly bullshit, because this happens pretty much every year, especially when his contract in another promotion is ending. Brock Lesnar apparently is interested in making a return to the UFC. John Jones is the matchup. Do you think there's any truth to this? Do you have interest in this? And just what's your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yeah. So generally, if you put two skilled enough fighters together, even if the fight doesn't make sense necessarily, I'm going to be on board for it if there aren't serious ramifications that other people are now suffering from. So like when somebody gets a title shot that they don't deserve or something like that, when somebody jumps the queue and you see them up there now fighting for the title where they clearly don't belong, I think it's a situation that has a lot of ramifications down the line. And it sends a message to your fighters that rankings don't matter. This isn't a real sport, all those different things. But in this case, it legitimately is just like a fun fight. So it's like, kind of like when we were seeing Rich Franklin and Vanderlei Silva kind of go at it when Vanderlei was on a losing streak and Rich Franklin was towards the twilight of his career. It's fights like that kind of makes sense. Just his kind of a one-off, or Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz, So I'm on board for it since there aren't any real ramifications towards a division. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave either of them a title shot right after, because it would be at heavyweight. Yeah. So, I wouldn't be surprised by that, but at least they'd have a fight coming in off their returns, so it wouldn't be as bad. But I mean, if you hate both fighters for being roided out or whatever it is, because they both had USADA kind of issues, then there's no real harm if they're both doing it, is there? So as it comes to a matchmaking fight, I think it's just kind of a dumb, fun fight that doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't mess up any rankings. It doesn't have any real ramifications. It is a fun fight. That's a fun fight for, competitiveness sake. You really honestly think it's a bit of a wild card. Although I do think John Jones will be able to outmatch with just pure skill is what I think he'll be able to do. Obviously not strength, but skill wise, I think he'll be able to get it done. Yeah,
I think so too. I think it's funny with Brock Lesnar, every time his WWE contract is coming to an end, it's like, I'll just dangle that UFC carrot out there to Mr. Vince McMahon. Why? Money. But to be honest, I'd love to see it, and I think anyone who's in who makes MMA videos, Would love to see it, because it's another interesting fight that you could kind of do some fun stuff around. I think if you're an MMA fan and you're a really hardcore MMA fan, which I do feel I am, but if you're that really kind of staunch one that's like, oh, I don't want Brock Lesnar fighting because he's clearly on steroids and John Jones is this, that and that, whatever. But if you're just a fan and you want to see interesting fights, I don't see how you can not like this. You know, it's a fun, crazy fight.
Man, I'll say this controversially, but I think Nate Diaz is right. They're all on steroids. Like,
yeah.
I think, dude, I don't care who's going to hate me for saying this. I think Chuck Liddell was on him. I think Randy Couture was on him. I think anybody that you consider to be a legend was probably on them. Matt Hughes, I've done Legends videos about these guys. I have a ton of respect for them, but I think it's a competitive place. And I think that if you don't do what other people are doing, getting that little extra edge, I don't think you're winning. Yeah. GSP's probably been on it, and I'm never going to say definitively that that's the case. Yeah. I'm never going to say that they were, and I'm never going to treat them as such. But I think that drug testing is, no matter how good it gets, it's like computer hacking. It's like you're trying to keep up with what people are doing wrong. It's not the other way around. You can try to be preventive as much as you can, but people always figure out creative ways to get around that. They always will. They'll do it with the law. They'll do it with stealing. They'll do it with theft. They'll do it with piracy. They'll do it with anything you can ever think of. And I think steroids are no exception. There are very few people, and I don't have anything to substantiate this. I realize it's controversial, but I think they're all on something. And the fact that someone's getting caught, I think it's either a matter of time before most people get caught that you think are legends now in the USADA era, or they just happen to kind of, by the grace of God, as they say here in the South, they somehow make by. But I don't think 99% of them are clean. I really don't.
Yeah, that could be true. I remember back in the day, Dennis Hallman, he was one of the first guys to come out and talk about steroid use in MMA and specifically in the UFC, and I'm pretty sure the number he gave, this was pre-USADA obviously, was like 90% or something like that, something really high. 90%, right?
Yeah. So when I did make I obviously won't say who it was, but I had a very in-depth conversation when I made my commission video with somebody that was integral in setting up a commission, because they felt I had some things wrong when I made the video, which I appreciated, because I got to have, literally like a 3-hour conversation with this person from an athletic commission from their perspective on it. And they're like, dude, I've been at all these fights where you can tell, and we just don't have the proof. It's like a cop knowing that it's like a cop knowing Snoop Dogg is smoking weed in California right now. They got him on tape doing it. But, he could just say, oh, no, that was fake weed. Yeah. He could just say, he could just go with any defense he wants to, because they don't have any actual definitive proof that is marijuana. And even then, there's still laws that protect them. You could show a marijuana plant right there. There's still laws to protect him from it. They have to bust him. They have to catch him in the act. That's what they have to do. So I know a lot of athletic commissions, and at least the person I talked to had, from what they told me, they had a wealth of experience, and it was a fascinating conversation. But yeah, that's what I think is going on. If you want to really go down this rabbit hole and you really want to attack people for their USADA violations, man, you're opening up you really have to be serious about it. Yeah. You really have to be able to say some of the legends, some of the people that I really care about as champions, the people that got me into the sport, the people that I looked up to, they're probably on something. And the truth is, all sports are probably that way. Almost all of them. It's like there's just a beautiful documentary that was done on Lance Armstrong and how he got busted. Icarus? He was microdosing. Icarus, yeah. Awesome. He was microdosing while they were in the middle of the Tour de France journey. Literally, he would jump into the bus for 5 minutes, boom, he would take some EPO and he'd be on his way. It was microdosing just enough to get caught, and it was just enough of one of those things where they figured it out just in time to be able to get him. There's just so many advanced ways, and anybody you can think of, anybody you look up to. I mean, Lance Armstrong, especially in America, was just kind of this. Obviously the poster boy of, bike racing.
Yeah.
It's not a big sport here whatsoever. Nobody gives a shit about it. People like to do it recreationally. They have a lot of fun about it. But I never, ever, ever once somebody say, hey, you watching the Tour de France? No. The only time that ever happened was because of Lance Armstrong. And he's this cancer survivor who's dating Sheryl Crow. There's just this really, really famous individual. And you see him in this situation where it's like, dude, it's like this is a really bad example, but I want to say it was Fat Joe that was on a Fox broadcast talking about how Conor McGregor had just lost at UFC 196 to Nate Diaz. He was like, dude, it's like Game of Thrones. You don't ever know who's going to be taken out. It might be your best character. And that was kind of like what Conor McGregor was. And that for USADA, I think it's the exact same way. You never know who's going to pop, and I think likely most of them will.
Yeah. Fat Joe, as in...
The rapper.
The rapper.
Yeah. Lean back.
Yeah.
That guy was on a TV show. It was on, it was who's that guy that everybody hates? Skip Bayless? I'm pretty sure he was on his show.
Oh.
Total dumbass, but.
That's weird.
Yeah. Sumo wrestling.
Yeah. The next big UFC event, there's a fight night coming up with Cowboy Cerrone versus Leon Edwards, which is an excellent fight. But the next big pay-per-view is UFC 226, and is probably one of the better cards on paper in a long time. At least the main card is. You have 2 title fights on the top of the card. Without going into them too much, we can just touch on a couple of the fights because they are excellent, and without making any predictions. What's your thoughts on DC versus Miocic?
Without making any predictions?
You can make one if you want. I'm not going to force you.
Please don't hurt me. But I think if I'm just going to go with this, because Cormier's done so well at heavyweight. He never lost while he was there. He was beating legends like Barnett, won the Strikeforce Grand Prix. As a result of that fight, was beating guys like Big Country. He's fought other wrestlers like Dan Henderson in the past and wiped the floor with him. It feels hard to count out Miocic at this point, though. I thought for sure Ngannou was just this ridiculous force where he laid his hands on you and it's like the touch of death. It's just one of those kind of things. And Miocic was smart. Miocic was able to get away from everything. So I think at this point, I'm finally flipping just a little bit towards Miocic. Yeah. Cormier is the better wrestler, but we saw what happened with him and John Jones, where the height difference and the reach advantage was enough to make it impossible for him to get a single takedown. I think maybe because that was against Gustafsson. So, I guess maybe that's a good example where he has overcame reach and height to such a degree that was comparable.
And when he fought at heavyweight, of course.
Yeah, but he also wasn't fighting guys that really had. He knocked out Bigfoot.
Frank Mir.
Roy Nelson. Yeah, and Frank Mir is more of a grappler, not a traditional wrestler. So he never really fought a true heavyweight grappler.
Well, Josh Barnett.
Well, sorry, I said grappler, but wrestler. Josh Barnett was just a grappler, and so was we just said him. But yeah, so more so of an actual wrestler that has solid defensive wrestling. Yeah,
I get what you mean.
Yeah, I just said Stiopic. Miocic.
Go full Joey Diaz.
Yeah, I'll go with Diaz over here. So for me, I think that's going to be really hard to overcome. He's obviously the bigger guy. We've seen him take punches from guys like Anthony Johnson, though, so Cormier is well capable of taking a big punch. But Miocic, I would give it to him. God, that Holloway-Ortega fight is so goddamn good. I love that fight. Yeah. It's just the best fight to make. Ngannou's going to destroy I just think he's going to destroy Lewis. He did gas, but I also think he was getting wrestle-fucked towards the end of that at least. Lewis, I don't think he's going to be able to do that to him in any stretch of the imagination. I think Ngannou's going to take it to him. We'll say Chiesa is going to beat Pettis. Saki versus Roundtree. God, that's another good fight. This card is just so good. Maybe Roundtree because of experience rather than Saki's K1 background. Costa will beat Hall. Anti Medeiros will beat Mike Perry. I think he's got more tools. Yeah, I don't know if I've got enough of a developed thought about this. Dan Hooker, it's good to see him back. I think he'll probably win.
Yeah, I like Dan Hooker. But Burns is good.
Sun's out. Font. I don't know. But, yeah, I'll leave those two alone. I've predicted pretty much everything.
You know what I love about that? I opened it up with, you don't have to give predictions, and then you proceed and give me all the predictions.
I can't talk about it without thinking. It's just like, almost like, I don't know. I can't even think of an example, but it's almost like that's the only thing I can think of. Who's going to win that fight?
Yeah. It's the most important thing. Carl Doran, a former host of the show, DC versus Stipe is a fantastic fight. One of the true super fights. It was a super fight, in my opinion, that we didn't know we wanted. That makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah, that does make sense. Whoever said, Stipe versus Cormier is a great fight that needs to be made. Nobody really, but when it was announced, you're like, oh wait, that is great. That's an awesome fight.
It seems like, because he was saying who was calling for this fight before it was made. Can't wait for it. One of the things I think that probably started that conversation more than anything was the initial conversations of John Jones calling out Brock Lesnar. And then all of a sudden you had this opened up kind of thought of like, oh yeah, these guys are so dominant at that weight class that conceivably they could go up and have a super fight with Stipe. I'm just going to keep going with the Diaz thing here, but conceivably one of them could do that, even though Jones wasn't interested in it. And then you hear kind of Cormier being like, well, I'm interested in it, I'll do it. So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially after they both fought on the same card at the beginning in January. Was that 221, 222? It was just one of those things where it was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. They're both extremely dominant. Although I'm just dying to see Gustafsson fight for the title again. I am dying, and I don't want him to do it when Cormier's gone.
Yeah.
I don't want him to do it, even if John Jones never comes back. I just wish it was against one of those two. If he's going to capture the title, that's what I would like to see. And I think he's the best in the division in that group of people underneath.
Yeah. So. James Kane said, wow, what a card. I'll be staying up till 7:30 in the morning with you, Rob. Perfect, because, it's nice, it's silly. And I also, Jason, I saw a tweet that you put out, and I was quite offended by it. You said, it was like, the Contender series, something about being on at 1 a.m. And I was looking at that, and I was like, 1 a.m. What is that? 1 a.m. That's nothing.
What do you think I am?
Yeah, it's nothing. If you have any more questions in the comments, we're going to stay for another about 12 minutes and then we're going to head off. But I saw Daniel Cormier's appearance on Conan, which I thought was really, really good. Daniel Cormier, again, like Robert Whittaker, I think he's just such a good representative of the sport. He just comes across as such a nice guy. He's an absolute killer, but such a nice guy. Speaks so well. Charming dude. I think... and Miocic, again, he's another really good representative of MMA.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that interview. I saw that he tweeted about it, and he posted a picture just talking about how much fun he had. Were there any kind of like highlight moments in your mind? Or?
They were just talking about apparently everybody that goes on Conan loses. So he was saying like McGregor went on when he fought Diaz and he lost, and Diaz went on the next time and lost. Ronda was on, lost. Miesha Tate was on, lost. So he was saying that up until like 3 days before the show, he wasn't going to go on Conan. So they were kind of having a laugh about that. But then it was just a really fun interview. Great. Really fun. He came across really well. It's weird because as a person who covers the sport, there's something about like MMA guys coming off really well on mainstream TV shows that I like, and I don't know why. It doesn't really matter, but Yeah,
because there is this weird thing that you see from hardcore fans, that this weird, strange elitism, and Tom and I talk about this a lot because it seems to be like the 4-letter word of MMA is calling someone a casual, and I don't get it at all, because you were literally that person a couple of years ago. It might have been 10 years ago. I don't care when it was. At some point, you were not a fan and you were a casual, and you started chiming in every once in a while, and you were wrong too. Like, everybody goes to that phase. So I think it's really stupid. So I'm like you, when I see people grabbing more eyes and more attention towards the sport by going on talk shows and things like this. I'm like, no, I wish, because even here, even though it's in America, I don't live in Vegas. I live out in the middle of Tennessee, where once every 2 years a UFC event comes, and usually it's pretty lackluster. That's just the honest truth of it. We had the Strikeforce Brawl here, and that's the biggest thing that ever happened here.
Awesome.
Yeah. But I didn't even go. I didn't have friends to go with back then. It turns out one of my best friends actually did go, and it was before we even met. But like, that's how it is here. I wish it could be like, oh, I just talk to an average Joe and have an intelligent conversation, not just about Conor McGregor, because I think even over there, especially in Ireland, but I just mean in the UK as a whole, you could be where Tom lives and everybody knows who Conor McGregor is because he fought Mayweather. But aside from that, it's like, oh, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe. You wouldn't get any thoughts back from the average Joe, So it's nice to see them on TV, making these appearances, having things go well, and somebody possibly saying, yeah, I'd like to see that fight, Yeah.
So I love it. I think it's great. It's the more the merrier. JL said Holloway versus Ferguson. Who gets it done? Ooh, Holloway versus Ferguson.
That's such a hard.
I think Holloway. I'm a big Holloway fan. I think he's one of the most technical guys in the division. Or in the UFC even. I've compared him to Mighty Mouse on a few occasions. Not because they fight in the exact same way, but I think their game is just pure MMA. I think they're just excellent MMA fighters. They don't really rely on one thing or the other, although they do certain things better. Like Holloway is clearly his strong suit is to strike, but he can do everything really, really well. He's not going to be this crazy good submission guy, but he's really good positionally, has really good takedown defense and all this. So I just think he's one of the best all-rounders in the game right now. Ferguson's a great all-rounder too. I think he's just a little bit wilder and will probably get caught with something, some straight punches coming in.
I think it was the RDA fight that Ferguson had where, I don't know if it was John Anik or whoever was doing play-by-play commentary, was just talking about how a lot of the kicks that he was landing were shin on shin, just because Ferguson is that crazy. Yeah. He's just a nuts guy to just take pain in order to dish it out, and just has so much confidence in himself that it'll do more damage to you than it will to him, that kind of thing. So that's the thing that I think he has on the feet over almost anybody in the sport. He's just a crazy, wild guy that just doesn't care.
He's just crazy person in general. Like, he's just like, when he talks, I'm like, that guy is on a different planet. Yeah,
like when the Ferguson Verdum thing, at the media luncheon or whatever.
What was that?
That was all him. Yeah. Like, he started that out of nowhere. Like, Verdum hadn't really said anything. He just doesn't like him, so he just started talking shit. Yeah. And it was out of the blue. Yeah. So I think I'm going to have to go with Holloway if it were to. God, I don't know if I can give a real prediction on this. If it were to stay on the feet, I think I would give Holloway, just because he has that ability to switch stances so fluidly and just come at you from these crazy angles. Whereas I think Ferguson, he's just ridiculous. 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy who, you give him even one opening, like the Lando Venata fight, he's going to snap up a Darce choke, or he's going to get a triangle choke like he did against Kevin Lee. So I think there are slight advantages on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum for them, even though they're very close on the other side of the spectrum as well. So, man, God, that's such a tough one. I honestly can't give a prediction on that. I want to. I want to be able to say it. I want to be able to, but I just don't think I can.
Yeah, it's a great fight. Nick0424 said, we need casuals, otherwise the sport shrinks. And then Carl Doran said, MMA has gone mainstream in Ireland when you walk down O'Connell Street and you see two crackheads sparring screaming, I am McGregor. I've seen that. I have actually seen that.
That's great.
It's an interesting sight. It's weird. But yeah, that card, that 226 card is insane. And I can't wait for it, and I will be staying up for this one. I try avoid the fight nights unless they're the early fight nights to stay up, because it's too much, but I will definitely stay up for that. I have a quick question before we go. There's a Reddit thread that was trending there, and I thought it was a kind of an interesting one. It was you can bring back one legend in their prime, who do you pick? And this goes to Jason, and it goes to everyone in the chat. If there's anybody left in the chat, I'm not sure if everyone left after that crackhead comment. But there's choices. I'm going to give out the choices. If you can try to remember them in your head, and then let me know which one. So bring back this fighter in his prime. So not bring him back now in his 40s or 50s, whatever they're in. It's in their prime.
Okay.
BJ Penn, Chuck Liddell, Crow Cop, Fedor, Couture, Velasquez, or Hughes?
Ooh. I think I'm going to make a pretty quick one on that, actually, because at first I was thinking before you said that it would have been between Fedor and Anderson. And then there were some really good names that you listed there, but I think it would actually be Kane, because I think Kane's the best heavyweight there's ever been. I think he obviously made a very poor decision. I think he would beat Verdum if they were to rematch under the right circumstances. You know, he's not super injured. He's not C-level Kane. You know what I mean? He would need to be C-level Kane. I think he's the best heavyweight the sport's ever seen. Whereas opposed to a lot of those guys, if they were in their prime, I mean, like a Chuck Liddell, I don't think Chuck Liddell would ever beat John Jones. Never. I just think that the sport has advanced too far along, and that's not an insult to say the older guys would lose. It's actually a credit to the community and people like them that inspired people to start training earlier, younger, with those techniques, those further along developed things like, you know, Chuck Liddell developed cage walking, you know, like getting along the cage. That wasn't a thing before him. Now that's like a mundane, average, normal thing that you get taught. Same with a lot of the other things that he was learning. So not an insult to anybody, but yeah, Kane.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. Kane would probably be my pick on first look. But somebody who was I think it was Carl. Carl said the one that I was going to pick. It would be Crow Cop, just for the reasons of, I think if he faces a really good wrestler, like a really, really good wrestler, he'd have problems. But I think that a heavyweight, if you're going to pick a heavyweight on this list, I think it makes sense, because heavyweight is probably the division that really hasn't developed as much as the other divisions over the years. I think heavyweight, if you're a big hitter, if you have decent takedown defense, you can still have success. And I just think Crow Cop was a really interesting guy. So that'd be my pick. I don't think he's the guy who's going to win a heavyweight title, but I suppose that's not really the question. The question is, who would you like to see in their prime against these guys? And maybe it would be that one. But I think if you're going to go on who would be most competitive, I think Cain Velasquez is a no-brainer. He's already shown against the current crop of heavyweights, maybe not the most recent crop, but at least, you know, most of the current crop, that he's competitive and probably the best. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I see Nick over here saying Fedor. I just think that when you think, I mean, what was Fedor's prime? 2006, 2007. He won the belt in 2003. Crow Cop's is probably about the same.
Yeah.
Crow Cop won the Grand Prix in 2006. Yeah. I personally just think that if you come into the game like a Gokhan Saki, I mean, he might turn things around as a K1 guy coming into MMA. I think he's past his prime, to be honest. But like, I just think if you're coming in it from a detriment when guys are training everything now, like Cain Velasquez had some of the most beautiful combinations, like the way he knocked out Nogueira.
Nogueira, yeah. Dude,
there were like 6 punches, pinpoint punches that landed back to back to back to back. Just a guy that was so like, they're not like the thing that you would see out of Fedor. Like when you see him beat Tim Sylvia in Affliction, he's throwing these like big looping wild hooks. I mean, it's literally all hooks. Like, and again, I'm not a fighter. I'm not saying I am, but I'm just going off of what other people say. But like, what does Boss Rutan always say? A straight punch will always beat a hook every time. It's always going to get there quicker because it's a direct route. Whereas this is coming all the way around. It's just a matter of timing. And I think somebody like a Cain Velasquez beats any of those guys. Obviously, Crow Cop has that, but I mean, we saw what just happened with Ngannou, who probably has, I mean, it's really hard to debate someone's left high kick versus either hand. I mean, we haven't really seen Ngannou pull off a kick, but we saw what happened when he went up against Stipe. It's as simple as you can train that stuff, but to a certain extent, it's going to be really hard. And somebody like McGregor, if he ever does fight a Khabib, you also get a pretty strong answer on what it looks like if you're not very good at wrestling and you're up against somebody that is extremely adept at it. But then he did beat Alvarez too, who is a bigger guy, taller, more even built out, but you never know who's stronger based on that. But yeah, that's my thought. Someone saying Hulk Hogan, that's the greatest. But I just think Cain Velasquez had the better technique. He came in at a better time, learned from all those past mistakes, was a better wrestler, can dictate where things goes, and he also has the submissions to go along with it. So that's my honest opinion. I just don't think any of those older guys, it's just not fair to compare them with everything that everybody has now. It's like saying, was a tube television in 1990 better than a LED 55-inch 4K television? It's not that the hardware is bad necessarily with them, but it's the available tools to build the television.
They're a product of their time, but
yes.
Carl actually made a good thing there. I do want to ask you as well, just really quickly, does Cain ever fight again? JL asked, does Cain ever fight MMA again?
I think so.
Yeah, I
think it'll happen
eventually.
I'm not confident, but I do think so. The last interview he did with Ariel Helwani, he said, I'd like to fight. That's how he said it. Not the most reassuring thing, but I'm just not seeing quite that red flag level of just giving up or anything like that. I do think it will happen. It might be a shell of himself, but I do think I think he's so determined he'll at least give it another shot, if nothing else. And hopefully he's back to his former self.
Yeah, I hope so. But what I was going to say was that Carl made a decent point that just gave me an idea, was that you've seen how quick Cro Cop learns in his prime in Pride. If you have him in his prime now, how much more he could learn. So in that way, if you brought these guys back, but not in the state that they were in their prime, but just in their, I suppose, as you said, you can't really compare TVs because they're a product of their time. But if you have their base kind of talent and ability to learn, I suppose that changed the question a little bit, but yeah, it's probably still Cain.
I mean, it depends on how far you want to go back. If you want to go back to him as a 21 year old,
as a 6-year-old.
As a 6-year-old, then sure. He has the physical capabilities to learn it. Yeah. But if you go back to his prime, his prime, you could argue, was before Pride. And he did learn very quickly, which I think is a very good point, but he's still coming from a deficit. Yeah. I don't know how many guys you're going to see that. Even somebody like Darren Till, who is known for his K1 abilities, he was a European champion, and then going over to Brazil and learning a whole lot of the ground game there, being a Muay Thai instructor where he was, and then really, really starting to blossom in MMA. He was still a lot younger than Cro Cop was. I think it's just one of these kind of things. You either learn it young enough now. I think you're at a real deficit. Or you have a base that is just so good for MMA to where you can be like a Brock Lesnar and still sometimes win. But I very much think heavyweight is also in the Stone Age still, to where you have a guy like Mark Hunt who's just never cared about the ground game.
Yeah,
he can lean on that so much. On that sense, maybe it is something. But when you think of the guys that really took it seriously, like a Cain Velasquez or a JDS in their prime, it just seems like that the deficit is just so far to overcome that what happened ended up happening, where a year later he came to the UFC, Cro Cop did, after winning. It was only 07, and he won 06, the Pride Heavyweight Grand Prix, or Openweight, I think is what it was.
The Openweight, yeah.
No, it was... Yeah, it was Openweight. It was Openweight. It was just that Vanderlei was in there, which was just kind of the wild card because he replaced Fedor. But... I just think there's such a deficit that unless you know it, it's just getting to that point now where people are learning so young, and it's such a second nature, where you got the Rory McDonalds where they never once took a karate class before. Maybe he took one karate class, I don't know, but he's trained MMA from the beginning, and that's the world we live in now.
Yeah. Excellent fighters.
Quick
question before I let you go. The big question I'm sure everyone's thinking. How many years in prison is Conor McGregor going to get tomorrow in his court case?
Oh, geez, that is tomorrow. I was thinking about that last night. It keeps escaping me for some reason.
But in all seriousness, he's slap on the wrists.
I think it's going to be a hefty fine. I think they're going to milk him, and I think that's about it. I think they're going to be like, all right, well, you might have hurt somebody. You might have to pay them some damages. They might settle out of court. I guess that would technically be a separate issue, but no prison for that.
No.
I mean, people have done way worse than that and not gotten prison. So I don't think anything's going to happen, but he's just going to have to pay up. He's going to do the classic thing.
Any visa issues there? Potential visa issues? No.
No,
I don't think so either.
I mean, maybe a couple months. like what are you going to do? Like you're going to say, oh, you can't come to America. You need to, you can't reapply for another visa in a year. It's like, fine, we'll just have a massive fight in England or Russia with Khabib, or Ireland. I guess really Croke Park is like the only place that you can really have a big fight. The arenas are too small, right?
Yeah. Well, our biggest indoor arena is like 13,000, so it's pretty small. So then you have to go a stadium. So you have the Croke Park, which is like 80,000 seated, and then you could add more for around, and then you have the Aviva, which is, I think it's around probably 35 or something like that, so it's a bit smaller but still huge. Yeah, you're literally gonna have to build an apparatus over because it will rain. It just will. Yeah. And it's not like a football match where you've got pretty much an open field where there are no overhanging electronics and a lighting system and microphones so you can hear the mat and the action that's going on. It will just devastate the fight. It's just impossible to do with that. And then they're going to hang up the screen so everybody can still see, because they're not looking at a football field. They're not looking at that. They're looking at two guys, so they have to have those screens. There's no way to get around it. So unless they build the apparatus. So it would happen in England, or it would happen in Russia, or maybe even Australia. But I don't really. I think it would be funny if they tried to do something with a visa. I think that he's going to get fined like something ridiculous, like what they tried to do with $300,000 or something like that. I think he's going to get a really big thing, and he's going to have to do some stupid community service that at the end of the day means nothing. It's going to mean something to those kids, but he's just going to go on with his life as soon as he's done. It's not going to change him, Yeah. And final one, does he fight this year? I think so. Yeah, I think he fights by the end of the year, if not sooner, if not by fall. And God, I hope so. This is the thing. This is a hugely poor moment on somebody like Conor McGregor. It was so dumb, so stupid. It's really annoying, the fact that he's called out just about every other fighter than his division, saying he was supposed to fight RDA and all this stuff. It's really annoying, and it's really grating, I think, on fans that just kind of want to see the old Conor back. And that's what I really hope for. With all of that, some of the most exciting times in the sport, I don't care if you loved him or you hated him, they were the best times in the sport. Same with somebody like a Brock, or same with somebody like a Ken Shamrock and a Tito Ortiz, or Tito versus Chuck. These big, massive fights are exciting events that draw in so many people for a reason. And sometimes they're ridiculous, and sometimes they don't really have any merit, and I'm not big on them. Like Nate Diaz fighting GSP. That's just dumb. We saw Nate Diaz versus GSP. It's going to be the same thing with a smaller guy, So I'm most of the time really, really against them. And I'm really, really against Conor doing anything but fighting for the title at 155 or fighting a top contender at 155 and just kind of like coming back down to earth again. But I'm really, really looking forward to when he comes back, just as a fan of somebody wanting to see that old crazy Conor McGregor that comes in, fucks people up, and says all the right stuff. That's what I want to see. Or the wrong stuff. Yeah, it would be absolutely amazing if they announced Khabib is fighting Conor and then they just do it. Like, it's been so long with Conor that we've just got the fight that makes sense, that should happen. And when that did happen, when Jose Aldo and Conor fought, I went over to Vegas for that. That was one of the best atmospheres I've ever been in, and because it made sense. It was the fight that everyone wanted. There was no dispute about it. It wasn't somebody dodging somebody. It was the fight that had to happen. And it was excellent. But thanks for coming on, Jason. This was great. We'll do it again. If you don't follow MMA on Point, if you don't subscribe to them on YouTube, go check them out. Really, really
don't do it. Yeah. If you don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah, go check them out on Twitter as well, and all that stuff. But thanks again. We'll do it again.
Yeah, man, really appreciate the time. And yeah, it's fun just to talk about this stuff. So anytime, man, I'll be happy to be on. So.